makes absolutely perfect sense that Christ would be a Capricorn and yet the Antichrist would be a Gemini.
You know.
Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Hacker Slash. If you're joining us again, welcome back. I won't let anything bad happen to you. If this is your first time listening, welcome to the party. We are a horror movie review podcast dedicated to telling you whether a movie is a hack,
A total joke, a waste of time,
or a slash.
Totally killer, pun intended.
We believe horror is for everyone, and as such, we're rating these movies with the perspective we've gained from our varying walks of life and the flavors of fear we fancy most. My name is Chris. I'm your friendly neighborhood slasher enthusiast. This week I'm joined by the Superfly Space Guy, Mac.
She wasn't conceived naturally.
The classic horror connoisseur, Sean.
the miracle of life can be a messy business.
And the paranormal paramour, Binks.
The girl is sick in the head.
This week we're checking out a 2024 film that serves as a prequel to an iconic franchise. This week's film drops us in the year 1971, a time of upheaval, change, and political unrest. A young American woman arrives in Rome ready to commit her life to the church, but the cobblestone streets lead her into a darkness that threatens far more than her faith. Her journey of faith reveals a conspiracy so dark, it aims to orchestrate the birth of an evil beyond comprehension. The film wields the precision of contemporary filmmaking while planting its roots deeply in the era's style. And in doing so, it manages to bridge decades and forge a prequel that both respects its origins and enhances the lore of its predecessor. This week, we're talking about The First Omen. Who's seen this one before?
I actually did not get to catch this one in theaters, but I was able to watch it when it first became available to stream. I'm kind of mad that I didn't see it in theaters, but it's all good. Funny enough, this has got to be like the second or third time, but I didn't think about doing this for the fucking podcast for some reason because it just wasn't in the immediate lineup, and I found myself watching this one for a second time the other day.
Meanwhile, I definitely saw this film on premiere day in theaters, and boy, oh boy, did I have quite the reaction leaving said theater.
I bet.
I mean, obviously, overall, I've seen this as the franchise and whatnot, but yeah, I'm glad I saw this in theaters, and then I just finished rewatching it earlier today. What an experience, both watching it at home and also in theaters. It's a shame you didn't get to catch it then.
Yeah, I did not watch it in theater. I watched it just streaming from home. And it was one of those that, like, when you see the trailer or just like the poster for it, you just think, okay, cool, I'll catch it when it hits streaming. It wasn't something that was like, oh my gosh, I need to be there opening night.
I managed to catch this in theaters. I got to see it with Allie and another one of her friends, but I had no intentions of seeing this. This is one of those where I've seen The Omen from the 70s. I've seen the 2006 remake because of all the marketing behind 666. I think that was also on June 6, 2006. I think that was a day that at MLB, the Angels were playing the Devil Rays, and they thought that was like a cute mix-up of sorts. This was a home moment in 2006. But it wasn't a franchise that I was super jazzed about going to see. I know Allie really wanted to see it, so I checked it out. But going into this, I really expected it to take a lot of the sinister undertone, but make it feel way more brutal.
For me, going into this film for the first time, knowing how impactful The Omen 1976 was and is in horror cinema, I was really expecting, maybe hoping for this to be able to tap into that magic a little bit. I want to see those intense scenes. I want to see those iconic scenes. I'm looking for those dark religious themes, a solid soundtrack, some good atmosphere. That's what I'm hoping, kind of expecting, but mostly hoping to see.
I think that in terms of when this was released, I was a little hesitant at first because, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but it was in a moment where it was literally challenging another nun-related film just a few weeks prior.
Was that Immaculate?
Immaculate.
Oh, we gonna talk about that.
We're definitely gonna talk about that. But I think when I watched the trailer, knowing that Immaculate was going to be coming out more or less around the same time frame, I was already a little nervous about it. And then a few months prior, we were doing the episodes on The Nun. So when I saw the trailer, I was like, all right, similar nun setting. The Omen, God, 1976, that's such a great film. How are they going to do this in terms of a prequel? I was curious. I wasn't necessarily put off by it. And really a lot of that has to do with Nell Tiger-Free, our main lead. She's in M. Night Shyamalan's Servant. I know Sean and I have seen that one. Such a great fucking show. So, so good. I can't recommend it enough. And I know that M. Night's very much hit or miss, but the big reason is because she's an incredible actress. And so if someone was going to do it right, I know it's going to be her in terms of a prequel for this franchise.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it seemed like a perfect fit, honestly. She's fantastic.
My expectations were so much lower than yours. They were as low as they can go. And it's not even due to anything about the marketing. It's not anything to do with, I didn't even watch the trailer. It has everything to do with Exorcist Believer. And that taught me that you could take a film that people love and make however many years later this well-advertised sequel, and it's garbage. Completely unrelated to the original movie, except for one forced tie-in. And this is obviously spoiling how I feel about Exorcist Believer, but no, I mean, it really did make me think, okay, they're going to make a prequel to The Omen. There's been, 5 sequels already, or 4 sequels or something like that. And it's been how many years since the last time they tried to do it? Yeah, they're going to give it the Exorcist Believer treatment. So I was honestly expecting it to be like a garbage movie.
That's fair.
I think the thing for me is, looking at what you just said, Exorcist Believer does something super different from The Exorcist, but I find that movies that hinge upon the power of faith aren't really a big home run for me. Now, The Omen doesn't necessarily, and that's okay. I think, I don't know what the rest of that franchise is like, but this isn't one that when we think about just spirituality or anything that I haven't felt like super compelled to watch or dive into. I don't gravitate to this. Going into this, when you have this hope that it's going to be more brutal, if it doesn't get brutal, it can be a little hit or miss. Watching this, it felt interesting, but I think there are some moments that also just felt so long. I felt every minute of this 2-hour runtime. And there are valleys of boredom, but there are actually really key peaks that make the burn feel worthwhile. And this is where it got really interesting for me. Because when I thought about that brutality, I thought physical brutality, viciousness. But instead, what I got was like this emotional brutality, this like predatory sense, this tension, this feeling of suffocation, this violation. There's like this sinister predatory undertone and subtext that oozes from this movie's pores. And it's difficult in the same way that I think watching parts of Rosemary's Baby is difficult, but this feels worse in a good way.
That is an apt description of the effects that this movie has on you. It right away drew me in with just like the cinematography here, the way they paced out their shots and the panning of the camera, and then matched that up with the setting. Like I could feel the dust in the air and I could smell the incense laden mustiness everywhere. They really do a great job here of placing you in that environment, and you feel like you're there. So when they have those moments of tension, it's even more real because it already feels like you're in the moment. And then when they make you wait for something to happen or not happen, you were going to bite your nails off.
Yeah, I think we'll touch on the runtime for sure in a bit, and I see where you're coming from on that. I think for me, unsettling is the feeling you get from this film. That is the feeling. This movie is immersed in atmosphere. You have excellent shots and scenes that have some beautiful set design and lighting. And then you have these buildups with this really great acting, and it leads to really tense and unsettling moments. And some of the things that you're touching on, Mac, it just leaves you with this really anxious, unsettled feeling of tension. And whether they give you something or not, it just creates that feeling. And I think that was just the biggest thing that just took over, that feeling of just being unsettled from pretty much the start to the finish.
Absolutely. And you bring up the start, which I think right off the bat establishes this film as like a love letter specifically to not only like classic horror, but The Omen 1976 specifically. And we talk a lot about unsettling. Absolutely. But one thing that I felt even in this rewatch is that it goes from unsettling to this dazed, happy-go-lucky ambiance amidst what we obviously know as a viewer is a fucked up scenario. And I think a lot of that has to do with, again, going back to Nell Tiger-Free and how she portrays our main character, Margaret. This character, Margaret, she's very hopeful empathetic, and she's excited to be a nun and to join this cloister. But then slowly but surely is uncovering the brutality and horror that is going around her, right? Especially in this church. And so as a viewer, I feel like I'm just spiraling more and more into this very disturbing and fucked up and like, what am I watching horror film? It's something that I definitely didn't anticipate through the trailers, didn't anticipate even as I was watching it. I know that without a doubt, when I left the theater and even today, I'm like, this is probably the most disturbed I've felt in a good while. And I think that's incredible, specifically for the fact that Arkasha Stevenson, she's the director. This is her first film. This is her debut film. Okay, let's talk about women in film right now and their debuts. They're knocking it out of the park. And that is a great segue to what is my disappointment. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, and it's the fact that it's released or was released alongside Immaculate. And that's not to say that Immaculate, that's a separate movie. We're not reviewing it right now. I want to just talk about in general, Nun and this devil incarnate film thing that was happening with Immaculate and the First Omen coming out at the same time. It's unfortunate because it deterred people from watching this film and checking it out just because they were exhausted of Nun films. They were exhausted of it. And again, the Nun 2 earlier. And that's a shame because at the time that this film was being discussed, being talked about in studios, was being filmed, Roe v. Wade was recently overturned just a few months ago. And I think common audiences aren't realizing is, of course, we're going to have films regarding women's bodily autonomy, especially when it comes to politics and how religion is being integrated into that. Of course, we're going to have that. And how are we else going to get it if it isn't in nun films? And this kind of devil incarnate topic. So, of course, I'm getting like big picture about it. I just feel like people didn't realize it at the time. They just throw it away and are like, oh God, another nun film. But it's like, guys, horror films are always talking about the things and the horrors that we are living in real life. And that is what this film is. And to write it off just because there was another Sydney Sweeney film that was going on at the same time, which again, we're not reviewing, we're not talking about, right? But it's just like, it sucks. I think it's unfortunate, especially because this was her debut, like the director's debut. It sucks.
I'm just going to say this. I didn't fucking watch Immaculate. So in my mind, this movie won. There you go.
Oh, okay.
You know, Binks, you talk about the bigger picture of this, and for sure, there is a lot baked into the fibers of this movie story and its commentary and what it discusses. But I actually want to look at this from a slightly different perspective, and it's the one disappointment I have. When I watched this in theaters, I had not seen the original Omen from 1976 since maybe early 2000s, maybe. I think I watched it maybe around the time that the 2006 remake came out. So I watched this, and then when I got out of it, I thought, okay, if we ever do this for the podcast, I'm going to watch this again, but then I'm going to watch The Omen right after it because of the way that this movie positions itself as a prequel. And I'm disappointed in the continuity between the two. And I think that's the one thing that, in retrospect, I don't know if it takes away from this movie or if it just makes me feel worse about the original Omen, but it leaves me with a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Now, examining it as its own entity, though, this works so well as a standalone film, and I love that. It balances enough detail to make a deeper dive worthwhile. I think if you're a fan of the original, if you're a fan of just horror cinema in general, you're going to find a lot to dig your teeth into in this movie. And that shouldn't feel surprising, right? That's part of what makes a good prequel. But sometimes there are prequels that jam in fan service to the point where it's obvious even if you haven't seen the original films. Let's go right back to Mac, The Exorcist Believer. The second you get a little medley, you know something's happening, right? This doesn't do that, and I think it's a very, very tasteful way to approach it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for sure. I don't know if that same disappointment carries over for me, although I do also agree with Binks, like it suffered from being released at the same time as Immaculate or around the same time as Immaculate. But I think what you said, Binks, feature film debut, what have you, I think she has done some short films and things like that, but nothing to this caliber. And I got to admit, knowing that, I was a little bit worried about how this one was going to go for that reason. But surprisingly, I feel like the film was really well done. It came out a lot better than I anticipated it, to be honest. And I feel like I don't know if we're talking about the same things, Chris, but the slight redirection or reimagining of the lore, the backstory, it was a little bit surprising, I feel like. I think it was a bit bold, but I don't feel like it was disappointing. I don't know if we're talking about the same things or if you're just talking about how it ends and sets up for the next film. But that really is the thing that I feel like could have been one of the most disappointing things in the film, but I don't think it was. I think it worked out well for the film, at least for this film. Even thinking about the 1976 Omen, I know there's some lore changes, there's some facts that have been twisted around, and we're going to talk about that, but I don't think it really ruined it. It was graceful enough. The biggest disappointment of this film probably is the 2-hour runtime, just because I feel like it could have been an hour and a half to an hour and 45. There are parts that could have been edited down a little bit. It does feel like a slow burn in some areas, but that's like nitpicking. You know what I mean? That's not something that I feel like absolutely needs to happen to make this a fantastic film. I'm just thinking 2 hours, thinking through the movie. Could we have narrowed it down a little bit to get to a shorter film? Probably.
Geez, let me tell you then about 5 things that pleasantly surprised me. The first 2, that's going to be the score and the soundtrack. Those 2 things were fantastic. Loved it. We had some moments where they would play some music and I was like, oh my gosh, like how could you have picked a better song to match the scene that we're moving out of or moving into? The other 3 things that surprised me are humans. Ralph Ineson, Charles Dance, and most of all, Bill Nighy. The casting here, they brought in some heavy hitters. And it's always great to see Bill Nighy in something that is not comedic or is something that is comedic, because he like excels no matter what he does. It was just wonderful choices. And I think everyone who was supporting did a great job. I think that our main character here, like that has, you either have to go all out or you have to play it very subtle. And we had both performances in the same movie. It was incredibly impressive, but that doesn't hold up if everyone else is lame. And no, they had a great supporting cast here.
Thank you for bringing up the score, by the way. I got a little curious and I had to look it up because you unlocked the fact that I loved it. And I did want to Google who did who composed it essentially. So I looked it up real quick, and funny enough, they did do the score for Cube. I wasn't on that episode,
Nice.
But I know what y'all's thoughts were.
Fucking A.
However, a couple collaborations with the one and only Robert Eggers on The Witch, The Lighthouse, also did The Black Phone. So those 3 alone are pretty outstanding scores. So I completely agree with you. The score is incredible, and I think it helps build that dread and that disturbing tension. Like, please, I just want to stop this moment. Oh God, the hairs were lifting up on my body. Like, I just did not feel okay in certain scenes, guys. I did not. There were a couple scenes that were obviously supposed to make you feel unnerved and unsettled, like we've talked about. But there was one scene in particular. Okay, I actually saw this film with Ripley, and let me tell you that the both of us were holding on to each other and like begging for the scene to please stop, because it was a slow burn that played on a couple of senses and phobias at once. It was like homage to even like Cronenberg for a moment there. Like, it was really weird and not okay. So I think in terms of fear and the fright factor of it all, it doesn't have the classic jump scares and the classic horror stuff and whatnot, right? I actually recommended this film to my brother, and he got back to me saying like, oh, it wasn't scary at all. And I was like, I didn't recommend it to you because it was scary. I recommended it to you because it's disturbing as fuck. And like, there are scenes and moments here where you want to leave your body and please turn off the TV at times. So that's what this film's going to do for you. If you're looking for the classic jump scare and the James Wan of it all, look somewhere else.
But I love that though. I love that though, because there's a scene, and we can talk about it later, of course. There's a scene that any other movie today would have done as a jump scare. And this movie chose to take its time and pan and zoom, or maybe not even zoom. Maybe we just panned and sat there staring in the darkness for a minute. And that choice, I think, worked really well for just like the overall feeling of this movie. It didn't make it scary to me. I'm sure there's people who watch this who were like grabbing each other's shoulders in the movie theater. None of the movies we watch really have that effect on me. It is very gross in many moments. That is for sure. And there's a lot of spots that are going to make you squirm a good bit. And so I'll give them credit for that. But I love the fact that they didn't try to get you with the jump scares. And if they make any more after this, do what you did here, because taking your time is always appreciated by me.
The score does add to the intensity of some of these scenes. We don't get the traditional jump scares. What you're all saying is 100% accurate. I think the horror that you're going to get is from the lore. It's the story as it unfolds. It's this hauntingly eerie atmosphere with a couple of things that might not be traditional jump scares, but there's certain situations and flashes that I feel like could get you if you're just like sitting on the edge of your seat, like that kind of thing. And then there are those scenes that really just grab you and twist your insides, and you're like, oh my God, what am I watching right now? So there is that level, like you're going to get a high level of feelings in this movie. It may not be reactions from audio spikes and traditional jump scares, but it is horrific for sure.
It's the examination of control and autonomy. And Binks, you described it so beautifully earlier, but that's the real horror of this film. So this may not be something that's going to hit for a lot of people. I watched this the first time and I was struck by a lot of it, but watching it a second time, I'm disturbed and have like personal relationships with this movie in a much stranger way than I ever really, I think, wanted to consciously acknowledge when I saw this in theaters. It's something that sits with you. And I think that's where it really earns a lot of its originality. It earns points for being deeply unsettling with the way that it leans into scenes that are sheer nightmare fuel. This movie has scenes that are genuine nightmares for people.
Sure.
And it lingers in it. It dwells in it. It really wants to take you along for that ride. It makes you squirm, where the original film, it relies more on tension and you knowing what's going on and imagining what bad things can happen next. This movie's about the present moment, and that is what's terrifying and different and a departure from the rest of the franchise.
What Stevenson did with this film in terms of originality, we talked a little bit about maybe some Omen lore that she twisted, and we can get into that in detail a little bit later. So maybe that's where we can say originality, to be daring enough to change a couple things to be able to tell this story in the way that it needed to be told, to then bring in all of these disturbing scenes and tell a story of female body horror, tell a story of, like I mentioned earlier, the removal of female bodily autonomy in a religious setting. But I'm just going to rattle off a few names here, okay? Because this is the biggest thing of it all, is that this is a massive love letter to a ton of great classics in horror. So we've got a personal favorite of mine, and the biggest one, if anything, is Possession. We have Repulsion. We have Eyes Without a Face. We have, of course, Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, Elizabeth Taylor's Identikit, and then more recently, I'd even say Smile. Okay, for a small, brief moment.
I see it.
For a small, brief moment. And I already mentioned the Cronenberg of it all, too. Incredible. This girl said, name me all of the best ones. I'm going to do every single one of them right now. And did it so freaking well, to me, at least. I thought it was so beautifully done, so subtle in some moments. Incredible work in terms of originality, and daring enough to do all of that and to pitch it to Disney? Girl.
To pitch it to Disney. It's a really kind of refreshing prequel to get, especially in horror, because not many sequels, prequels, what have you, end up doing very well, especially when you try to do something from something that's been already well established for so many years. And you could easily argue the point, you know, and I don't want to beat a dead horse or anything, but the whole thing with this coming out at the same time as Immaculate, the whole thing of this plot in essence is the exact same thing as Immaculate, you know, different reasons, different subtle points and whatnot, but in a nutshell, it's the same fucking story. And so when you look at it from that angle, how can it be original? But then when you look at what it really does do and how it delivers, and man, it's just very interesting to see that this origin story kind of unfold. And the fact that this movie and this director is bold enough to change the lore, I think just says something that has to come into play for the originality of this film.
And you've had decades to think about how to do the storytelling for something like this. And there's, you mentioned it, Binks, a lot of shoulders to stand on here. I was even getting feelings of like End of Days, Good Omens of all things. Like, was feeling that a little bit. There was plenty of moments that maybe you think about like Suspiria, both versions of Suspiria as well. Even The Exorcist. There's just so much here that it's pulled from. And you can either do that where it seems like you just cobbled together pieces of other movies, or you can do it like this, where it seems like you're able to learn from all those other stories, not just what they did visually, but like, how did they choose to tell their story and how do they choose to have their characters interact and develop from the beginning to the end here. And I think they were able to successfully say, okay, we know all this stuff. Let's write our own story and let's put it all together in a way that like makes sense, works well. Even if you point to 15 other movies, it's not a negative here.
It really isn't, but you mentioned there, Mac, how do you take your characters from the beginning to the end? By nature, a movie and its ending has to leave you with a promise of what's next, or the question of what's next, or what else could happen. But a prequel in and of itself, you already know what happens next. So it has to give not only a really fascinating character arc, but it also has to really give an ending that I think sets up the next film well. I absolutely loved the ending of this movie. There is something that is a disconnect for me. I mentioned this earlier, and Sean, I don't take umbrage with the small details that were changed. That's fine by me.
Right.
But there is a disconnect in terms of the consistency of some of these people and what's going on that just does not make for a cohesive watch.
Okay.
It's like ending this movie, starting the next. And in some ways it is cohesive, and in other ways where it's like, oh, okay, this feels a little bit jarring. But again, as an entity, as its own movie, this ending I don't think could have gone any better.
I'm curious to see you like elaborate a little bit more on that when we get into the second half in the spoiler section. But I feel like I really enjoyed the ending of this film a lot. I know that there are some details and some things that are a little bit interesting to see how it's going to play into the Omen 1976, just trying to think about how this ends and how that starts and all of that. That is a very interesting thing because there's some questions, there's just naturally some questions. And I'm just curious to see where your head's at, where my head's at, and if we are talking about the same details or not. I don't know. But I do like how this new lore is maybe going to play into this franchise, or even has the ability to play into this franchise, because not only does it like carry into 1976 and in essence it does deliver that handoff into the timeline of things, and that's cool, but there is this possibility of maybe having a spin-off of some sorts, right? There is this possibility of diving deeper into some characters that we may not have had before and things like that. And so that's interesting. But here's the thing. When we talk, somebody mentioned earlier about like from beginning to end, right? And I loved seeing how Nell Tiger Free's character, Margaret, opens the film. It's almost like she's this very naive, angelic figure. It's very bright. It's colorful. You just get all of these vibrant colors in the beginning of the film with Nell Tiger Free. And then by the end of the film, Margaret has really just transcended down and is, without giving too much away right now, literally walking downstairs. That's what we'll call it. You know what I mean? It's literally just from one end of the spectrum to the next, from beginning to end, light to dark. It is a transformation, and it was incredible to witness.
Absolutely. It's like I said, it's like you're spiraling slowly and surely, like the light is going out. And I do like the ending. I think that there is a small cliche part of it, right, that is necessary. And I struggle when I talk to my friends about this ending because, in a way, how do you expect this to end when you know that this is a whole franchise? It's like you said, Chris, it's like this is a prequel. You know how this is going to go. So why are you questioning decisions of certain characters? Why are we getting into this whole debate when you know how this is going to go? So I think that what Stevenson does with this film and how it ends makes sense for who the characters are, knowing full well that we need to now go into the Omen 1976. However, that small little part that I'm talking about, I think was just a little bit too cliche. And I think it can remove you from this spiral. It might be like a cold splash of water on your face because it's giving a little bit too much CW, a little bit too superhero.
Not the CW.
Yeah, like it's giving a little bit too Marvel, MCU, end credit. That's a bit of a shame. I don't think that they necessarily needed it to have that seamless transition into the Omen 1976. But alas, what are you going to do? And I think I do know what you're talking about, Chris, because I think we've talked about it a little bit. It is a part of that cliche moment where if they had just removed that, maybe it even would have helped that continuity piece that you're talking about. I can't wait for us to get into it.
There's a couple different ways they could have approached this. I think a lot of other movies would have said, all right, we have our climax, roll credits, we're done. They chose to stick to a traditional Freytag's pyramid and have a falling action and get into the denouement. And they really wanted to tie up those loose ends here. But at the same time, they wanted to throw out a couple loose ends, it feels like, at the very end there. They wanted to basically sequel bait when this is a prequel, which was kind of strange unless they plan on making another prequel.
That's what I'm saying. It's interesting.
Yeah. And so I'm curious if that's the plan, because that's what it felt like to me. It did not feel like we are ready for the Omen. It felt like we're ready for the second Omen or whatever on earth they would name a sequel to a prequel in this case here. But yeah, I mean, if that's not in the plans, then it was kind of a weird way to end it. We got to the ending of what I thought was the end of the movie, right? We have our climax and then it was like, wow, oh my gosh, I'm ready to watch The Omen. And then another scene started and I literally commented out loud, oh, it's not over. It kind of felt like Lord of the Rings to me for a minute. And we jump into that scene. It was like, oh, okay, I get it. You're just trying to set us up for whatever's next. And I'll agree with Mix. I don't think it was necessary. I don't think it's a bad ending, though. It works either way. It just kind of leads me to believe there's something more here that you want to show us.
It's like it played an audible on the field, right on the snap, right before the snap. It played an audible. And it's like, I got to have options here. QB sneak or going for a long pass.
Well, we'll see how we all land on this movie. But before we start actually rating it, Sean, how would you describe the gore score?
This one is interesting to say the least, for sure. This is one of those ones that there is some good quality gore in this one with some great effects. I feel like we get to see some blood and guts, but in those moments, nothing that would give us more than a happy medium gore score. But then we get these other moments where the film takes you there and then does you one better and takes it borderline too far, which makes me want to give it a high gore score. But I feel like we're going to meet in the middle with a medium high gore score.
And what about the animal report?
So I feel like on principle, I want to say that the animal report is definitely not okay. There's a biblical reference to an animal that doesn't feel safe. So I'm going to give this a little sus, but no normal animals are harmed.
A little sus.
Let's go ahead and get into our ratings then. The First Omen from 2024, was it a hack or a slash?
Look, I'm going to keep this one short. I'm just going to throw it out there. I just feel like this was a very solid film. It's a little bit long, sure. It is sort of a slow burn. I get it. But this movie delivers a storyline that is interesting and it immerses you in a world that is truly captivating. The film is very atmospheric and the cinematography delivers some absolutely stunning shots. It wasn't afraid to take this on. It wasn't afraid to reimagine the story a little bit. And I think it paid off, to be honest, with most of what it did. There was this sense of opaque mysticism about the original Omen 1976. And I think what this film does is it brings you behind the scenes of an absurdly terrifying concept that is drenched in religious dread. And I feel like this film successfully delivered a solid prequel to a beloved film in horror cinema. And it did so with grace and thoughtfulness. And it's a sinful slash for me.
Sinful.
Got to be sinning.
I love that. This is just an example of good storytelling. I think a lot of movies, they want to show us a lot of stuff. You know, they want to wow us with visuals and they want to maybe catch us off guard with really cool effects. And I think this movie has cool effects. It has good visuals, but really it just focuses on telling a good story with good characters that you either care about or maybe you don't really love that much from the beginning, but you don't know why. And it delivers, I think, on the why behind a lot of things here. And I think when I'm talking about storytelling, it has nothing to do with like, how do they have characters move through the world or anything like that? It has to do with what's the point of this movie? Is it clear on the screen? Is it clear in the dialogue? The characters that we have, are they real? Do they feel real? And I think we have a lot of depth here with our characters. There's moments that seem like red herrings throughout the film. that then patch themselves up and keep you on moving. And then by the time you get to the end, everything is made painfully clear. And you feel like you've been through an experience watching this movie. It's like listening to someone tell a good joke or tell a good campfire story, and every detail they give you is welcomed. It's not annoying. It's not like one of those stories somebody's telling you and you're like, I just want to go. I just want to run away. Please end the story right now. No, I think by the end of it, you're left thinking like, oh my gosh, how did I handle all of that information? And it was just masterful. I think I enjoyed it from start to finish. And that is in 2024, very welcomed for, of all things, a prequel. So it's a slash.
So I shared how earlier this film had me so disturbed and how it's an incredible love letter to many classics films I love or are inspirations to many great horror directors out there. And with it being Stevens's directorial debut, this could have gone either way, and it was incredible and daring. Like I said, she outright went for it to pitch this straight to Disney with what clearly contains some extremely disturbing imagery, and they were down for it. Especially when this film tackles the lack of female agency over one's body, while also serving as a generic origin story for what is obviously a legendary horror IP. This really could have gone very south or hit the mark. And to me, it hit the fucking mark. There are stills from this film that I believe will still be brought up for decades to come. So bravo to the director of photography, the cinematography, the whole production team, because they also fucking nailed it. And I think did such great justice to all of those horror films that I mentioned earlier. So that being said, I think if you are a lover of the genre and even art house film in general, I think you will definitely be satisfied with this film. I know that I've seen it twice now. I definitely would see it again, but I want to highlight my first watch when I obviously saw it in theaters. I left that theater with a large popcorn in my hand, screaming to the sky, I love movies. I have a witness, ask Ripley. I was so moved and so fucking hyped after seeing this film. So far, as of the today recording, it is my favorite horror film of 2024. I will go on record saying that it was incredible. So that being said, if it doesn't tell you how much of a fucking slash this is, then I don't know what will.
I can't wait to see if something unseats it by the end of the year.
I have a guess as to what it might be. But so far, this is the winner.
We'll see. Listen, my issue with this movie is how long it feels. And I know I have my other issue with the ending, or maybe not the ending, but something that exists within the entire movie. But once you get past that, this movie is absolutely rock solid, just like you said, Sean. And Mac, you described it as an example of just good storytelling. This movie is uncomfortable, and it reminds me in a very twisted way of things that I experienced and felt as a teenager entering adulthood. Not that I've ever been in these characters' shoes, by no means, right? But when a movie can tap into that and prey into that kind of feeling without being too much, I think that's a really, really deft hand. Before this movie, and I think this is what really sums it up, before this movie, I didn't give a damn about Damien. But our girl walked so Damien could ride his stupid fucking bike in The Omen and make me actually care about that franchise. So for that, it's a slash. And with that, the First Omen from 2024 has earned a universal slash. You can't find this movie available streaming online. Check the link in our show notes to see where you can find it right now. Go check it out. Then join us in the second half so we can break down that lore together. We'll see you in a bit.
Introducing Little Lucifer's Surrogacy, where miracles have a way of happening. At Little Lucifer's, we've been finding homes for little devils since 1971. That's right, over 50 years of making sure the crib isn't the only thing that rocks at night. Our cherubs come guaranteed with a smirk that could make a saint swear, and enough mischief in their diapers to keep you on your toes, and occasionally running for holy water. Our exclusive services include custom-tailored birth scenarios crafted with the utmost discretion and care. Conspiracy? More like our little secret pact to ensure the right baby lands in the right crib at the right time. Why settle for a normal baby when you can raise a leader of tomorrow's shadow realms? And for those concerned about getting caught in a celestial crossfire, fear not. Our aftercare support includes everything from media manipulation tips to full-on identity relocations. At Little Lucifers, it's not just about swapping babies. It's about rewriting destinies. Embrace the mystery and let the legacy continue through you. Remember, in our business, confidentiality is as sacred as the service we provide. Little Lucifer's surrogacy, because why just have a baby when you can have a hellion?
Welcome back, folks. You are now entering the spoiler zone for The First Omen from 2024, which has earned a Universal Slash. Now, we have a lot to unpack here, but before we get into the specifics of our ratings, let's go through those kills.
Well, we have a rather surprising kill count of 20 kills in this film. 13 of those being just the test babies that were born deformed and killed or what have you, right? So that's just sad.
R.I.P. 13 babies.
R.I.P.
Classic Sean move.
Yeah, it had to be 13. It's super fitting. There were a total of 15 files, as we know, and 13 of them died because they also mentioned that Margaret and Carlita were like the only two survivors. So that's how we got to that number, in case you were wondering. But 20 kills in total and some pretty solid ones in here. So let's talk about them. What were your favorite kills?
Okay, there are so many to choose from, but I want to go for a very traumatic one, and that was portions of Paolo.
Oh.
Hamburger helper Paolo. The bisect. The lateral horizontal bisect of Paolo.
Man.
Bro, when are you and I gonna have different favorite kills, bro? When? We always have differing opinions, and yet somehow always the same godforsaken favorite kill.
Because we like the good shit.
They're so goddamn the same.
But take it away, Binks.
Yo, it was just so sad. Not only was he hot as fuck.
Binks Kinks.
Favorite kill for completely different reasons.
Yeah.
I was here for the emotional shock and the trauma of it all.
Binks is just sad that the hot dude died in the film.
And his dick was what got crushed, probably.
Bro, the chemistry between them at the club, was so hot.
Legend has it his crotch is still pinned against that truck.
That truck better work. No, I'm kidding. That's so fucked up. No, but really, okay, listen. I felt like it was extremely fucked up because the chemistry between them was so adorable. I loved how they were playing off of each other at the club and the whole butterfly thing when he was trying to lure her down to dance. And I just thought it was so cute and adorable. And obviously...
But then he was in on it, that fucking asshole.
Yeah, well, right. And then it's like she wakes up the next day and you initially think, oh, it's because she had a wild night. Fast forward, you know what really happened to her, and he was a part of that. So when you see him freaking out, you're still kind of wondering, like, what happened? Obviously, you get the hint that something more occurred. But regardless, in general, it just seems like he just got and mixed into some crazy ass shit. Obviously, I'm not an Paolo apologist just because he's hot, but it is very sad, regardless, her reaction when she tries to stop him from dying, tries to be there for him, and she full on rips him in half and is holding him.
Mm-hmm.
Did anyone else feel like that was just like at least a tiny bit campy? I thought it was a tiny bit campy.
Okay, sure.
Literally, she just ripped his whole upper torso off, and
yeah,
it was too good.
It was great.
And we just like sit in it for a while. We're just like, oh, ma'am.
But it's also Paolo's delivery of, I'm stuck, I'm scared, I don't want to die.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a moment. Yes, it was a little bit of camp. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of silly goose. What are you doing out here grabbing things? That can't make any sense. But it was still gut-wrenching. And her emotional breakdown after that, 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
This movie really did not waste any of the kills that I can remember, at least. Like, they went big on a lot of them.
Yeah.
I think the other one that was pretty stellar was Sister Angelica, because you were thinking, okay, she's losing a little bit. She's going to hop off that thing and splatter on the ground. And they were like, nah, dude, not so easy. She's going to set herself on fire and then hang and swing. And that was unexpected. They really surprised me there. So I was like, that's stellar. When you can surprise us with a kill.
So that was iconic for a very specific reason in terms of the original one. I'm not going to spoil it.
A nod to another kill. Yes.
Yeah, nod to another kill.
Birthday party.
Yeah. Happy birthday. Oh, God. No, it was, she also, just like the look of Angelica is so frightening, and the way that she's just staring down, obviously drenched. So fucking good. I thought that her kill was incredibly scary. It's a shame, though, that we do see it in the trailer, but I think that the few times where we get a kill in the trailer, there's very few times where we can actually still feel the weight and the impact in the movie. This is one of those where I still felt like, oh shit, you know, just because I knew it was going to happen, it didn't take away from how like stunned I was. Another one that I think was great, another homage, is of course the father in the beginning, at the very beginning with the pole, which was so fucking weird because that man, the back of his head was full on split, and Father Brennan stared right at that thing and didn't have a horrific, like he wasn't horrified in his face. And that's where I think they kind of fucked up a little bit. If I noticed clear as day that someone's back of their head was full on gone, I'd have a different look on my face. Yeah.
He just starts praying.
Not only does he start praying, but he's still like talking to this guy. Like, you are not fazed at all. Not only by the fact that that guy's head is gone, or like rather the back of his head is gone, but he's also talking to you and moving. Like, none of that seems strange to you. Ugh, so eerie.
There can be miracles when you believe.
Yeah. I loved it though. Outside of maybe the reaction being a little bit off, I feel like how everything played out in that kill specifically was just really artsy, really cool. Just to see his expression so eerily, just like smirking and just nonchalant about what the fuck just happened as he dies. Amazing.
Yeah. I also want to say, though, Sister Angelica absolutely looks like Mia Goth.
A little bit. Yeah, for sure.
She was Mia Gothing the shit out of that scene.
For sure.
Anyone with bleached eyebrows is giving me a goth.
Okay, that's also true. That's also very valid. Can I also say fuck Cardinal Lawrence, though?
Love the actor. Fuck Cardinal Lawrence. Absolutely. I'm glad he got that right in the fucking neck. What a little bitch.
Right in the jugular. I feel like we have to mention the baby that got switched out at the end, because even though they don't show anything, we all know that poor infant baby child got its head smashed in. We all know that. That's part of the lore. We see it, and that's a fucked up kill. But we got to point it out because we're here to talk about some crazy kills. And even though we don't see it, I don't think we want to see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know what's fucked up, though? They couldn't just sub in Damien. I feel like they could have made this easier on themselves. They didn't have to kill that baby. They could have just kept that baby at the hospital, sent him to an orphanage, sent that baby back to Rome. You could have done literally anything.
Anything else?
That would require a smidge of kindness and empathy that clearly they do not have.
No, these people are fucking crazy.
While we're talking about kills, though, I kind of want to talk about, if we may, a kill that didn't happen and a debate a little bit surrounding it. So I mentioned how in the ending, my friends and I, we kind of get back and forth about, oh, she should have fucking killed Damien. You know what I mean? She said that she wanted to kill the baby and all that. Like, why wouldn't she in that moment? And it's like, guys, come on, remove yourself from the logic that you think would be required and remember that this is a prequel to a movie. On top of the fact that
they literally can't kill Damien.
They literally can't kill this baby. And one of my friends in particular was trying to entertain a lot of different options as to how they could have gone about it, which I agree with some. I think it maybe is a harder sell to say that Margaret then has a lot of compassion for her son when she seconds ago obviously had the intentions of killing him, and even before then was very like adamant about having it gone from her body. But she was possessed, right? So to then have the baby, she was possessed. There's a lot of other things that can constitute why she would keep it alive. I don't know. I'm just curious about your guys' thoughts.
Well, there's the very fact that she herself is also a child of the jackal.
Right.
She's living proof that this kid might not actually grow up to be evil incarnate. Like, she's not a bad person.
It is her baby still, technically.
Yeah, there is the nature of it, but there's also the nurture of it. She spent this entire movie with Carlita trying to protect her or try to get her out of this situation. So yes, the plan is to have a male heir to the devil's throne, whatever the fuck. However, in her heart, with the compassion that she has, being born from the jackal does not intrinsically make you evil, at least by what we see from her and Carlita.
Mm-hmm.
There's the nurture that's required from that. So the questioning of that or the hesitation in that wasn't lost, at least for me. I thought it was a great moment, a great detail.
It's also, I think, forecasted, right? We get a little bit of that at the beginning of the movie where she is praying that everyone will see that all life is worth living or worth keeping or protecting, something like that. I forget how she phrases it, but she's expressing a very common thought, which is that we should not abort babies. But then when she's literally impregnated by force with the spawn of Satan, I think it hits that I have the right to choose in this case what I'm going to do here with the spawn of Satan.
Again, Rosemary's Baby.
100%. It felt just like it. It also felt like Good Omens because we have the same kind of storyline there.
Okay. Crazy thought. Follow me down this delusional train. Imagine if she did kill Damien at some point, somehow. And then the Omen gets set up as the princess bride when he pours poison in the cup, swaps the cup, and then when he's not looking, the cup gets swapped back. And the whole time this cult is just raising this baby, thinking it's an evil-ass baby, and it's just a normal-ass fucking kid from Minnesota. You know what I mean? It almost paints it as like a dark comedy. And now I want to see a Tucker and Dale versus Evil style retelling of The Omen, but with Damien dead.
Interesting.
I'm bought in for sure. The gag is on the cult. The gag is on the church. I love that.
That would be hilarious. Well,
thank you for entertaining me down that road. I think I just needed to hear everyone's thoughts because I felt like, man, am I just seeing this from just the perspective of guys, it's a prequel. Of course he's got to live. Meh, 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 you know? Thank you for that. And I do want to say, though, even the shot of her holding the baby and attempting to kill him was kind of sick. Really, the whole ending... There's so many great production elements and stills and whatnot from this film. It's absolutely insane. We could probably go off for another hour. It's crazy.
1000%. This movie is beautiful to look at, even in its most disgusting moments. And I'm sure we're going to talk about the birth scene. And I'm not talking about her giving birth to Damien. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the demonic hand coming out of that woman's vagina. That was fucked up. And listen, I get it. I've been in delivery rooms. I've helped deliver a baby. I was also there when my sister gave birth to my nephew. It's nothing that I haven't seen, but there's something so specific. Just seeing a hand come out of a vagina, it's uncomfortable. I hate it. It was disgusting.
Amazing.
However, the quality of those effects, absolutely incredible. This is a movie that, again, you're dancing with it being in the 70s. If you don't nail every facet of this is modern cinema set in the 70s. That could have felt very disconnected and very disjointed, but they nailed it. No pun intended.
And even with the costumes for the children, since you bring up that they nailed the look of the 70s, the costumes for the children is really 50s and 60s, and you wouldn't even really notice. It's so fitting. It just works so fucking well. Everything about the setting of the 70s, the music, the lighting, everything. It just goes so, so well. I also really appreciate Margaret's look in general. I was doing a little bit of reading, and the costume designer was inspired by YSL in the 70s, which is so interesting because I feel like that as a fashion brand is very elegant, certain darts of black. They're kind of like Balenciaga, but in a refined way. And then when I watched this again, seeing that from that perspective, looking at her costumes, I was like, she does kind of look very flowy while still looking very refined, even in her outfit where she's going crazy when the riots start.
Yeah.
She's just flowing everywhere. Her clothes are going everywhere. You can't take your eyes off of her. Something about her. It's just not only the way that Nell Tiger Free depicts that scene, but her clothes as well, and everything about the look is very particular.
For me, it's all of these things, but it's also, man, the cinematography in this movie is just off the fucking walls. There's one shot that comes to mind immediately. It's just the shot of Sister Angelica coming down the stairs, and there's just something about the angles and the camera is shooting from and the way it gets the shape of the stairs. It's just a very captivating shots and very thoughtful shots and placements that just look really, really cool. There's the sound design we talked about is just fucking off the walls. And then I think what they do with some of the imagery in this movie is really interesting. They have this reoccurring spider imagery that keeps coming up. We actually see a spider crawling, right? But then we also see like those shots of like when Margaret is laying in bed and her hair is all in this perfect, almost spider-like web. It just these really intentional inserts of imagery throughout the movie that I just think were really well done and just well placed.
There's so much good there to dig into as well. I mean, if you go into the cinematography here, you have to do a couple things, or I should say 3 things really well, right? You have to have good lighting, you have to frame well, and you have to have some good movement. And they just nailed it almost in every single shot that they had. The lighting was great. The way they framed the shots was just to die for. But the movement, I think, is the thing that impressed me the most, because they were able to match that to the pacing of the movie. And even the pacing of the scenes within the movie, they just took their time. And there were some incredible pans that I think some people might be bored with. Other people might be like, hurry up and get to it already. And I was just sitting here like, let me soak this in. When we are panning over to a dark corner, talk about lighting, a dark corner, and we're seeing the habit just hanging on the wall and then realize it's a person, like, holy cow, that was so effective. And it didn't have to be a jump scare for it to be effective. It just had to be subtle enough to take its time and then catch you by surprise. And that's just like one example of all the good stuff that they absolutely executed with perfection. I'd say 90% of the time. I would have preferred more wide shots. I think movies set in like the 60s, or movies filmed, I should say, in the 60s and 70s, typically, I think, use those a little bit more than we do now. We definitely get more close-ups these days. But if you go back and watch The Omen, I think you're going to find that this is actually pretty similar in terms of how they like use the different types of shots. But I think it would have helped with setting it in 1971 more than it seems. And it's almost there. They did a really good job. The only thing they could have done differently is honestly shoot it on film. And that would have been, whether or not they did, I don't think it would have been worth the added expense, because if they didn't, they were able to achieve such a good look without doing that.
Sure, that's true. But man, this thing on film would have been fire. That's for sure. God, that would have been so good.
They could have really pulled the Ty West.
Oh, the Ty West. Oof. And he would have lived for it. I want to say, so back to what you mentioned, Sean, the scene with Angelica, that's where I saw the eyes without a face reference. Because in that film, there's a particular moment where she's going actually up the stairs, she's walking around her house, and it reminded me a lot of what Angelica was doing, just the positioning of it. So I feel like in general, a lot of the cinematography is where you're going to see all of these references and homages to all of the fucking films that I mentioned, the slew of them, right?
Yeah.
Even going back to the demon hand coming out of the vagina, of course. We've got the woman, she looks straight at Margaret and is smiling. And that's like this sinister smile, and the way that she's laughing, that was the smile reference. And
of course.
And of course, because she's smiling. But no, I'm talking smile it's like the way that they framed the composition of the shot to really make you feel uncomfortable with that fucking smile. That's what that reminded me of. There's obviously also, right after Angelica's kill, we have the glorious shot of Margaret going down that alleyway, and it's the Exorcist, ladies and gentlemen. It's the fucking Exorcist. Oh, so fucking good. I love it. But more importantly, it's a particular scene. Again, obviously also the production of it all, but my favorite scene is a reference to one of my favorite movies.
I already know.
And that is Zulawski's Possession.
Yep.
That entire possession scene, I couldn't even believe my eyes when I saw it in theaters. I almost launched myself off the chair, was like kneeling on the ground almost, okay? Sticky floor and all, okay? I was like, holy shit, she didn't do it. And she did. And she did.
She fucking did it.
So what's even, oh my God, I could geek the fuck out about it. That what's even better about that entire scene is that Nell Tigerfree, because of course, she's absolutely nuts, she filmed that entire scene cold. Not rehearsed, not even choreographed. That was the first take. They did it twice for good measure, but that was the first take.
The first take. That's amazing. That
she did it. And everyone was so unnerved by that scene. They were like, oh, holy hell. Couldn't even believe that she did it, that she nailed it. It was iconic. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. And again, that particular scene in Possession is considered one of the most horrific scenes in horror ever. in horror history.
100%.
And what I love about it, last little cherry on top, I love the irony that Sam Neill, who becomes Damien in The Omen 3, is basically the main character in Possession. We love that little homage as well.
Oh, look at that little connection. Didn't even think about that.
Oh, I sure did. And I was giggling and I was like, God damn, I love this director.
That's great.
She's doing it for me. I love it.
It's crazy because when you have the birthing scene, right, which is just a very intense scene, it's really, when you think about it, not the most confronting scene, because this scene of Margaret convulsing and being taken over as she's like being like further into the pregnancy or whatever, and she loses control of her body and she has the spasms and stuff, like that is arguably probably the most confronting scene in the entire film. And to think that she did do that in one take, I didn't know that, but that's absolutely phenomenal. Incredible job for sure. I did read that the direction they gave to Nell Tiger Free for that scene was just like whispering into her ear saying, scare the shit out of him, Nell. And that was it. And then that ensued. So just a little motivation, just a little push.
Just a little push, and she sure as fuck did it.
That delivery was absolutely insane. I think acting wise, I know horror movies don't win a lot of awards, but who gives a crap, right? We can all recognize when somebody's doing a stellar job on screen, and that is just phenomenal. My favorite scene also deals with some good acting, but it also deals with just, again, good storytelling and use of the medium. And that's when we're splitting between Luce's vow ceremony and Margaret down in the basement finding the files. That split was done also masterfully, like going back and forth. It was building tension. Somehow nuns prostrating themselves was shown in a creepy way to drum up the tension. Excuse me. That's one of the least exciting things. They're just laying there. But somehow that in their prayer, it's just like getting you on edge while she's making this big discovery down in the dark. And that on its own could have been a great scene without being spiced together. But the two of them together, holy cow, it just added like so much action to the movie without having to have action.
Yeah, it's a great juxtaposition. It's very much as above, so below, just with those words in themselves. It's the illusion of what we have going on, but what's really lying beneath the surface. It's great.
Yeah, I think this film also has some really good, like we're talking about arguably the best scenes in the movie, but there's some things that this film does that kind of gives you that traditional kind of horror feel, right? There's a couple that I'm thinking of. There's one, the scene where Margaret's kind of looking through the place at night. We get the whole like dark ambiance with just the lantern lighting the way, and it's just a very dark hallway. It looks great. It's creepy. It sets the mood. And then we get a shot of like her eye peering through the crack in the door to see the girl being strapped down. And then we get that nun peeking around the corner with that creepy little laugh that turns into a frown and crying. Like everything about that is just genuinely creepy, and that brings you into like, I think, more of the traditional kind of horror that you expect to see in horror films. But my favorite of the two that I want to bring up is the scene where Margaret is praying in her new room and overhears some weird shit at the door around her, right? And we get the moment, and we've had this in other films, right? But it just, if you do it right, it's super effective. And we get that moment where she sees the nun uniform hanging against the wall and the drapes are blowing in the breeze. And all of a sudden, it's just like this creepy ass old nun making some weird noise, and then it's gone. Super effective. It's like the hairs raising on the back of your neck, goosebumps kind of shit for just that brief moment. And it didn't need to be a jump scare. And it was fantastic.
I was curious if she was actually hearing them talk about somebody there, or if she was just having like trauma memories of her own childhood, or if it was both.
It was giving trauma memory. Yeah.
Yeah. Trauma is what it was giving, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Damn, this whole movie's just fucking trauma after trauma after trauma for her. Bless. Listen, you all have identified some absolutely stellar scenes, and there are so many more that are really great in this movie. But I want to give my favorite scene to a little bit of bullshit. And it's not a bad scene. It's not a dumb scene. But the reason why it's my favorite scene is dumb bullshit. And it's the C-section. It's the delivery of the twins. It's Luke and Leia being born. Specifically, it's because they turned, they said, we have him. And all in my mind I could hear was, ladies and gentlemen, we got him. That's it.
Yeah, same.
And also, It makes perfect sense. And this is where we actually really get into a lot of the characters in this movie and what my bigger gripes are. It makes absolutely perfect sense that Christ would be a Capricorn and yet the Antichrist would be a Gemini.
You know.
Sorry, Mac.
We could be both the Antichrist and Christ at the same time. Is that what they're trying to say?
No.
Okay.
Just the bad ones. That scene in particular, absolutely chilling. It's one of those where we have the exploration of how she's been violated in so many different ways. And this moment is just continued added insult to injury. And oh man, we get that. And it really sets off the rest of the climax with the third act. And I absolutely loved it. I want to reveal, though, my problem with this movie.
Okay.
I cannot watch, again, these two back to back because what the fuck, Father Brennan? You are inconsistent. It's a pain in my ass. I hadn't seen, again, the original Omen in so long, but you don't go from Father Brennan, the excellent and effective communicator in this movie, to the man that we get at the beginning of the Omen in 1976.
Okay.
And it's just a span of, 5 years? You just don't do it. And that's my only gripe with the characters in this movie. Kills me.
Okay. Yeah, maybe it's been a long time since I've seen the original Omen, so I'm kind of excited to rewatch it again and see exactly what you're correlating here because, okay, I'm starting to see what you're saying now.
It's literally it. Like, you can change the details. That's fine. You can make very intentional choices. But it feels like this movie tried so hard and was so successful in building something that leads perfectly into the next movie. And then you have this man. He could have just been any other fucking priest. He didn't have to be Father Brennan. He could have just been a different Father Brennan. He could have been anybody.
Right.
But you get the same character and he feels like completely different people.
I did the similar watch as you did, Chris, where when I went to see it in theaters, I then went home and I saw 1976. And I remember us recently talking about that, where it was like, damn, Brennan definitely acts a little different. And I think that there was certainly an opportunity in terms of character writing where he could have been written more seamlessly, especially since the time gap is only 5 years. I mean, I'm sure to some extent the reality that you failed and whatnot maybe weighs it on you. But this is where I think they should have removed that part of the ending where he goes to Margaret and says, oh, by the way, they're still looking for you or whatever. Like, just remove that whole bit so that it doesn't give us more in terms of what Brennan should have been like closer to 1976. You know what I mean? Or just in general. I think we already know, right? We already know that's Damien. We don't need to do the whole MCU of it all. But yeah, he's just not necessarily written the same way. I don't necessarily have a full-on problem with him, but I think it could have just been a smidge better. Just a smidge.
Mm.
The discovery of Margaret being the other child of this jackal isn't necessarily like a big shock, unfortunately. I found that to be maybe predictable, but had zero problems with it. When you evidently see the parallels between Margaret and Carlita, you automatically think like, oh, probably because you also have something to do with this, right? Or was that just me? I don't know. I felt like it might have been pretty evident right off the bat.
I feel like it tracks, but I feel like it was well protected throughout the movie. I didn't feel like it was one of those that are so blatantly obvious,
right?
In the way that we had something recently in Dead Silence, where I'm like, okay, the second you see this guy on screen, you know he's been dead the whole time.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like that. But what did trip me up is, come on, Margaret, how the fuck do you go your entire life with this mark and never notice that you have these grooves on your head? Because it did not look like a pigmentation thing. It looked like depth. It looked like there was ridges on those sixes.
Oh, absolutely. It tells me that she doesn't double shampoo. It tells me that who is really getting into your scalp? Not you.
Ruffles have ridges.
I'm just saying, you would have probably noticed by now. You had to have noticed by now. But speaking of that 666 mark, there's a brief moment earlier when Sister Angelica's like peeking out behind the wall after she sees Carlita tied up. And she's got the 666 mark on her cheek. Obviously, Angelica isn't one. But I don't know. I guess I say all of that to say that I didn't even realize that was there on my first watch. And I think that's already a hint to us as viewers to be like, okay, that's what it should look like before you actually see what it should look like. I guess I didn't catch that on the first go.
I wanted to go back to the idea that it was not surprising that she was a child of Satan, because in the beginning of the movie, when Father Harris is presenting the photograph, do they not say something about she could be 16 or 17 by now?
They say that she could be a teenager by now. Yeah. Which, again, how does that make sense in terms of her? Because she's obviously much older. I mean, has to be.
Well, yeah.
It makes sense because that first scene is in the past. And so to me, when that happened and then we see a 12-year-old, I was like, I'm not buying it. And so the more we learn about Margaret and the more we see her on screen, I was like, when's the other shoe going to drop? It's got to be. Plus, I was hoping, like, they're not going to show a 12-year-old birthing Damien.
God.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past him.
But the fact that it was her wasn't surprising to me. But the fact that they delivered on the whole, like, birthing sequence in the way that they did was the part that was like, okay, you made it worth it. You made it worth the fact that, like, a surprise was not super surprising.
Absolutely. Now, one surprise that I thought was pretty delightful is Luce, her roommate. I think that on the second watch, when she's telling the story of what she believed to be at the time of her telling the story, what I'm talking about is more so like Margaret, right? Margaret's perspective, what she believed to be a story of Luce encountering God, right? On the second watch, I see that scene and I'm like, oh shit, she's really talking about not like God, but like the devil, really. You know what I mean? At least that's how I depicted it. It's how the devil is speaking to her and how she's overcome and with like love and is enamored by this. It was performed so well, but on a second watch, when you see that, now knowing that she's a part of this whole thing, it's like, oh,
it's different.
That's a good point.
Yeah, look up betrayal in the dictionary. You're going to find a picture of Luce. I'm really disappointed, honestly. And you were the chosen one, ma'am. You were the chosen one. And yet here we are reminding Margaret that she can't have a single fucking good thing in this entire world.
She really can't. She really can't. And more so, I mean, not even a good man, because he also was in on it. Once again, R.I.P. Paolo. He was really fine. He was a good looking dude. It's a shame. It's a shame. I also, speaking of Margaret, last little funny tidbit, since you mentioned the whole thing of like, oh, ladies and gentlemen, we got him. My actual little quote thing that I was thinking of is when the students are telling her that she's a farfalla, like she's a butterfly and that she deserves to fly. For me, I was thinking of that quote from the other guys when he goes, I'm a peacock. You gotta let me fly.
Oh, I'm a peacock. You gotta let me fly.
Wow.
I was crying of laughter this second watch because I'm like, God damn it, Mark Wahlberg.
Okay.
I already had your brother in dead silence. I can't have you permeate freaking First Omen.
So good. Listen, we're getting deep with some of these characters, and I was just here geeking out that we got Thomas and Victor from Underworld in this movie. You know what I mean? Like, they're both elder fuckers in this movie. They're both elder fuckers in Underworld. They're just a little duo, and it was good to see him. It was good to see him.
Damn, we've referenced Underworld a few times this year. Maybe is it time for a rewatch?
Is it a sign?
Is it a sign? I think so.
Nice. No, but in all honesty, I mean, we've already talked most of this episode about Nell Tiger Free, so I don't know how much more we can really dive into that. But what I am curious about is with this new character, right? The fact that we have this sister, what happens with this character? We could literally get a side story to the Omen about this fucking spawn of whatever and figure, what do we go from there? How does it play into future movies in the franchise?
We got our little Renesmee.
A little Renesmee, yeah. It's just going to be really interesting to see. It just opens that door to a sequel to this, which is just hard to believe because it's a prequel to The Omen. So it gets really murky here, but there are possibilities and different avenues to go down that make it interesting to think of what they could do next.
I agree. It's like Mac was saying, you can do a little spin-off moment, but I'm a little worried about it. This is the part where I'm like, God, this was so good. Don't sell out to the studios. Take the win, take the W that Disney gave you, but don't take it any further, because I don't know how much more creative liberty they're going to give you outside of the hand coming out of the vagina the first go around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's going to give Has Been Hotel, where we're going to get the Princess of Hell, except she's actually a really good person and she's just a little sweetheart. That's where the shit's going to fucking go. She's going to be the next hero.
I truly hope that they don't take this in a superhero direction. When we watched The Nun 2, there was some parts of that felt really good, kind of like this. And then there was the rest of it that went in a very different direction. And I give that positive marks, but I was thinking of that while we were watching this because I think they attempted many of the same things, but this one actually landed the plane and succeeded on those things. And having the daughter hidden away, it's giving me Hannah, which I'm here for. But I know in the other sequels, he's got kids, Damien. I kind of liked that this is like another character. This is why I'm thinking, though, there has to be another sequel to this prequel because we've got 5 years in between. There's a lot they could do in that 5-year span, smack dab in the middle. They could do one every year and have 5 movies every single year now, but I hope they don't. But I think they could make one sequel to this prequel work.
Yeah.
I think it would be okay. Focus in on her maybe a little bit. Don't bring the two together. We don't need to have that moment in Obi-Wan where he sees and talks to Luke. Come on. I don't need it. But yeah, focus in on a different character and I would be okay with it.
And since we're talking about this whole prequel of it all, that's kind of what is, I guess, the worst part for me, or rather it's tied between not only the timing of the release and the competition that it had with Immaculate, but it is that last part of the ending being a little too cliche and where I get a little confused in terms of where this could go, because at the time that he comes back, obviously the sister has grown up a little bit, so there's probably been 5 years past since, or maybe a little bit more since the birth of the twins. But then you've got a little bit more of a time gap, I would imagine, until 1976, the Omen. Like, what's going to happen with all that? And I feel like it would be probably best if they had removed that scene so that whatever comes afterwards could have been a little bit more free with the writing of it all. Now they would have to go off of that small bit that could have been removed, or quite frankly, probably an end credit. You know what I'm saying?
It's true. Unless they already had intentions for something that they're not sharing with us, and that's the point of this, and we won't know until we know, I guess. But
true.
That's a very good point.
I just feel like I just hope that they remember that they did that, and that's what I'm scared about, right?
Yeah, don't fuck it up.
Don't fuck it up, because most times when they do those little end credit things, when you get to the sequel,
they forget all about that shit. They're like, let me do my own thing.
They forget what they did. Exactly. 100%.
I feel you.
Well, damn. Speaking of little things, though, I want to point out what I thought was the absolute worst part of this movie. The fact that she actually thought those Sciana files were even remotely concealed beneath that dish rag.
I also thought the same.
What the fuck was that?
I thought the same, which, by the way, continuity problem, because in the next scene, they are wrapped around correctly.
And then a second later, it's back to its bullshit of not being. Yeah, it was absolutely terrible. The most jarring thing. And I'm like, girl, you're smarter than this. You are smarter than this. What the fuck are you doing?
Margaret, have a tighter grip on that dish towel, girl.
Mm-hmm. You got a grip on this whole conspiracy, but you can't fucking hold on to the dish.
Let's be very real right now. No one's going to know what the fuck you're grabbing. No plate looks like that. What are you grabbing, woman? Obviously, it's files.
Receipts.
Yeah, it's files for sure. And the towel makes it more suspicious, to be honest with you.
Very, very sus.
Yeah.
So sus.
You fucked yourself on that one.
It's hard to find worst parts of this movie. So I'm going to list a part that was not my favorite that you all loved. And that was the hand birthing scene. That whole scene was oh man, it makes you squirm. It's a lot. And every time we look away and then we come back, it's showing more and more. And you're like, oh, they're going to show it. They're going to show way too much.
They took it there.
And they took it there. And it's amazing. But at the same time, I was like, gosh, I could have gone without having to see that. I would have been okay.
And the demon hand had stiletto nails, all right?
Yeah.
Sharp, motherfuckers.
Sharp, from within. Holy shit.
From within.
Goodness.
Ugh.
Well, honestly, I think the worst part of this movie is the fact that it came out right after Immaculate, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you right now, it's better than Immaculate. I'm not going to say if Immaculate is bad or good as a movie on its own, but if you're comparing the two, this is the winner by far. But whatever. I just think that it's the worst part because the fact that people are probably, and I think you alluded to it already, Binks, at the start of this conversation, it's just that people are probably just tired of this story. And it just sucks that this one came out after Immaculate, because by the time you get through, watching The Nun earlier on last year and then going into immaculate if you did catch that in theaters and what have you. And then you see that The First Omen is a very similar setting, and you're like, oh man, I already saw this. Do I need to see it? I'm probably just going to put this on a shelf. You're doing yourself a disservice. Like, you should definitely watch this film. And if you haven't watched either of them, I'll choose for you. Just watch this film.
I'm going to second that because I've seen both, and I'm going to also put a stamp on that statement. And I don't want to beat a dead horse on it, but I really do feel strongly about how unfortunate this was in terms of timing and release of these films. I understand that both of them were literally written at the time of Roe v. Wade, so I of course understand that timing wise in terms of studios and wanting to push it out, it's going to probably fall around the same year. The thing is, even if you had done Immaculate earlier in the spring and waited for The First Omen to literally hire me on the marketing team, put this out on June 6th, that would have been great. Obviously, duh. I just feel like even with a little bit more of a gap, guys, I think that maybe more people would have been inclined to watch it, but we're talking weeks difference practically.
Yeah.
And I know so many of my friends were like, I'm tired of the none of it all. And what sucks even more so is that people that don't really consume horror that much obviously maybe just went to see this film because they wanted the thrill and it was a big blockbuster. They just see it at superficial level. And this is not an audience, right? What I'm saying is they just see none. They're not seeing the bigger picture. They're not seeing the messaging. They're not getting the homages, nothing. And I think that if maybe they weren't so tired of none films, they would have enjoyed this film a lot more.
Well, listen, this movie is great. I'm not debating that. But I'm pretty done with nuns for a little while. I do need to wait a long time before watching this again, specifically because I saw it once in theaters again now for this episode. But it's, especially now knowing what it feels like to watch this back to back with The Omen, I need maybe a good year tops before I can, at the very soonest, maybe a year before I think I can really dig back into this. Some of this shit is just way too traumatic to revisit casually.
And that's what I mean. Even you, Chris, you're over the fucking nuns of it all. So that's what's so frustrating about this entire thing. It boils my blood. I think that I'm going to save this film a little bit. Ideally, I will do my own marketing, I guess, and I'm just going to be watching it every June 6th, that's for sure. But I think in 2024, if someone came to me and said that they wanted to feel disturbed, they wanted to learn more about classic horror films, they still wanted like a modern blockbuster feel, this is the film I'm going to recommend to them, and I would sit down and watch them see it because I want to see people's reactions to the disturbing scenes for sure.
Yeah, that'd be a fun context for rewatching this. I don't know that I could handle another rewatch anytime soon either. Maybe for Loose, maybe just for Loose. But for the rest of it, it's a lot and it sticks with you. It lingers. And I think this is something where eventually we have to get to all of the sequels. We have so many to choose from, right? We have 5 other movies. Is that right? That we eventually are going to watch. And we're going to take care of 2 of them probably pretty quickly. But yeah, what does this look like in the context of all of those other movies? Is it going to change our enjoyment level of all the rest of them? Because I think it will. Even the actual OG Omen, I think this is going to color our viewing of it. So yeah, I'm curious how it's going to play with all the others.
That's an interesting take. I didn't think about that, but maybe, possibly. I think, this movie for sure, I think it has definite rewatchability. I think there are a ton of nods and Easter eggs to discover. I think going into this second watch now, I was like, man, I can't believe I didn't prep for this show, like for the podcast while watching this for the first time. I feel like I just watched this a couple weeks ago or what have you. And now here I am watching it again. And then I watched it again a second time and I kind of want to watch it a third time. And I don't feel like I want to wait a whole year. So I might watch it a lot sooner than a year, which I think is cool. I think it does have a great story to it, and I think it just has a lot to enjoy. It's like one of those rare films that a lot of the different aspects of the film just fired on all cylinders, and it was just an enjoyable watch. So I think at some point rather soon I might watch this one again.
Well, that has been just an absolutely glowing recommendation, and honestly, I can think of no better recommendation to give our audience than the fact that, there you have it, The First Omen from 2024 has earned an official Universal slash. Now, we certainly had a robust discussion here, but the conversation about this movie does not end here by any means.
We want to know what you think. Where does this Nun film stand for you amongst the many Nun films in horror? Let us know. You can join in on the conversation by hanging out with us for free in our Discord. Click the link in our show notes to sign up.
If you've enjoyed listening to this episode, consider becoming one of our patrons. Visit patreon.com/hacker/ to enjoy more of the show with early access, extended episodes, bonus content, and live shows.
We'll see you next time, folks. And remember, belief is power.
You create something to fear.